good thing about my parents is that they've been incredibly supportive the whole way through.
Right.
So anything I've ever wanted to do, whether it's journalism, whether it's business, even if I've not got a background in something, they're still like, just do it. You can do whatever you want to do. So I'm really grateful. And yeah, mum's quite fun. My dad's quite fun. But in this instance, I ended up in the business unit. And they hired me because I'm really good at storytelling and really good at making things relatable.
Right.
Was I a business expert? No. Would I count myself to be a complete and utter business expert now? No. But I do like animals, and I'm very good at explaining terms using animals.
But I think you've said two important things there, which will be really useful for the audience. You see, a lot of people, they're afraid often to go into a career because they think, oh, I've not quite got all the sort of, what do you call it? Things lined up, all the bits lined up, and they think, oh, I've got to do a bit more. But like you say, if you've got the right support, you just sort of, well, learn to fly as you fall out of the plane, as it were.
Yeah, but I think that's probably part of our culture and our community, actually. You know, when families are all in, they are all in. They will basically be like, you can do anything you want. It doesn't matter how unusual or unconventional it is. So again, like I said, with my parents, my whole family, they were like, you want to do what now? Because I said, I go into work, I don't fully understand some of the terms that are being used, and yet I've got to be the one that makes sure that, you know, business is relatable to a very wide audience, because I work for the BBC at the end of the day. So it's got to be for like children, it's got to be for adults, it's got to be for an international audience. And so I would be sketching, you know, they talk about unicorns, they talk about hawks, they talk about all wide manner of animals, and I'd be like, oh, what's this, you know? And I didn't fully understand, but my job is to go out, immerse myself, bring it back to an audience and say, look, actually a unicorn is $1 billion startup. There's a spin-off, there's a narwhal is a Canadian version of that. A bear market works like this. And so with the business unit, you know, I'm sitting there and I start sketching. That's all it is. And then I'm going, there must be a dummies guide. There must be a primer guide like this already out there for people much like myself, who are at the early stage, as it were, and just want to understand things. And, you know, again, talking about family and community and Asian culture, you come back and you tell, you know, your family, oh, I've been learning this today, I've been doing this today. And you want to be able to have that conversation with them. So I want to say, oh, today I was doing things around unicorns. And they don't necessarily understand either, because they're not immersed in that world either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started sketching, and then I was very lucky in that I found another journalist who's also an illustrator.
Yeah.
And so together,
I should say the book is beautifully illustrated, and that makes it even more accessible, a subject which is too often seen as inaccessible, like you said.
yeah. But that's the thing, you've got to have someone who's open-minded, and that Dominic Bailey is the primary illustrator, the illustrator for the book.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him. We hadn't really worked together before, and I just said, I've got an idea, do you want to come on board? And he was just like, what? But then, like, with that, you know, a couple of days later, he's like, well, actually, I've spotted some animals too, what do you think about this? And I knew straight away that I'd found my tribe, my person, as it were, for something like this project.
How did you find your publisher?
With after a lot of tears. The book was not easy to sell. The book, in terms of, hey, we've got an idea, do you want it? We had like 100 rejections. I say 100, a lot of them are just blanks, like nobody bothered responding. I do not have an agent at all. And I think most people who have books, most authors, one would call them, they have an agent, and I think that would have made life a lot easier. But I would reach out, and again, people would be like, come back to us with something a lot more conventional, because there's nothing like this out there.
No, true.
No, but I was very lucky in that I spoke to one of my mentors. So that's really important. And that's what I found in my career, to have mentors, not just in journalism, but beyond. And at one point I said to him, this is really frustrating in that I've got this, but I don't know how to enter this world. It's like being back in journalism 20 years ago. And he said, well, that's interesting. He goes, you know, I've got an agent, but don't have a product. You've got a product, but don't have an agent.
Right.
I'm like, you know, a few days later, I was like, that's interesting, but why am I not doing anything with that? You know, there's a little bit of knowledge there. So it's always about taking that connection and going one step further. And then he introduced me to his agent. The agent didn't actually take us on, but he gave us really good feedback about publishers that we should considered that hadn't necessarily been on our radar. So I'd been doing a lot of cold calling and ended up in a lot of slush piles. And so we did something, again, very unconventional in that we created a prototype. So poor Dominic is now learning how to design a book from scratch.
Wow.
And so we printed it out and we sent it to the publisher, which again, I don't think you necessarily would do. So we're breaking all of the rules here.
Yeah.
And it worked for us in this instance because they could physically see, you know, here is an illustration of a bear market, and here's some funny copy, because, you know, we're quite funny, to be honest with you. You know, there's no point keeping it dry. Here's like, here's skunk works. Here's some funny copy about what skunk works are, you know, experimental groups. And so they saw it. And that's when I then had a conversation with them, and they were like, we like you. We like the sound of you. And I said to them, if you take a chance on me, I know that you don't do business books because you have to research your market, but you take a chance on me, I promise you, I will make this something. And they did that. They took a chance. They really did. And I stand by my word. You know, if anyone ever takes a chance on me, I will push. And that's probably, again, we have a very
and that's what they want. And I think there's several things there, you know, for the audience, I want to recap that you've mentioned, which are often overlooked, but you do them naturally, which is you had a mentor, and I'll ask you in a second how you found your mentor. You kept persisting. Okay, 100 rejections. I mean, that's persistence. You were innovative. You were determined. You know, it was a passion. That's quite clear. It wasn't that you expected something to happen overnight and immediately. Tell me how you got the mentor. How did you find your mentor?
So I have lots of mentors, actually. I'm
good.
I'm not discriminatory in terms of like going, oh, my mentors have to be older than me. They have to be of this certain background. I don't think one should do that. I think a mentoring relationship is very different to a sponsorship relationship or a coaching relationship. And I think that's really important. A mentor is somebody that you learn from. You learn from their experiences. So they could be way younger than you, but they have really good experiences that you don't have, that they're from fields that you're not immersed in. So in this instance, this particular mentor, I actually met when I was at an awards do. He wasn't even I've been on lots of official mentoring schemes. For example, I'm now on the board of the John Schofield Trust, which mentors young journalists. So although I had a different mentor at the John Schofield Trust, I actually met, his name is Matt Peacock. He's amazing. He used to work for Vodafone. He's now a consultant at Blurred. I met Matt and we just got on really, really well. And he's been incredibly brilliant, if I'm perfectly frank with you. He will check in with me every year, like every 6 months or so. You know, we will make sure that we will go for a coffee, pre-pandemic times, just to catch up, just to find out what's happening. So he wasn't an official mentor that I got on a scheme, but I do recommend people looking out for schemes. But he was somebody that came into my life at a time that I needed it, and has made an effort to stay in my life. And I think I provide value for him as well in terms of the experiences that I have. You know, I come from a very different background, but I have other mentors. You know, there's a woman called Brenda Imanis who's actually just left the BBC. It's just been announced, and she's amazing. You know, she's a pioneer. She went to BBC London as the arts correspondent. She's a Black female journalist. She's amazing. And again, she's been my mentor for many, many years. A woman called Rama Sharma. I have so many different mentors. Well, but you have to give back. You have to.
I want to draw those points out. Then I'll let you continue for a second for the audience, because I think, again, they're really important. You didn't just go for one mentor. You networked. You had more. You had maybe different ones for different parts of a career to achieve that success. And it was those networks and the doors that they can open, because then that leverages. So, you know, sometimes people go, oh, well, I got a bit lucky. You know, they use shorthand like that. But you put yourself in a position to be lucky, if I can put it like that. Obviously, there was tons of hard work involved. But when it came to finding a publisher, was it luck? Was it hard work? Was it, you know, networks? Was it somebody saying, oh, no, not me, but you might want to speak to that one? And I think that's an important lesson, particularly now in COVID, where, you know, people are losing jobs. They're thinking about career changes and stuff. And it's getting out there, reaching out there. And that's what you did with, you know, with confidence. And like you said, you weren't an expert in the field. You know, people sometimes think, oh, no, I can't do that. They always find excuses, don't they? But thanks to your family and your mum, we met, for people who joined late, we met a moment ago, they push you forward. They give you that confidence.
Yeah, it's about having that support. Like, you know, you've got a safe space, as it were, to be like, you know what? There are going to be haters. There are going to be people who just don't understand you. And it's very easy to be your own inner critic. I don't need extra critics. If I can, I can happily criticize myself. But at the same time, I believed in this book. I knew that there was a need for it. And the other thing, I think it's really important, I have like a niece and nephew, very young actually. You know, they're under 10. And it was that accountability. I'd come home and I'm like, I've got this project, and they've seen some of the pictures, they've seen some of the words, they've heard me talking about blimmin' bear markets. And my nephew, every time I'd go and see him, have you found a publisher yet? And I'm like, no. And he's like, and then he'll get his children's book and he'll go like, have you tried Walker's? Have you tried this? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure they're the right publisher, but you know what? You believe in me. And it's really important that I don't give up until, you know, the very, very last moment. As long as I've exploited every single avenue that I have, I am not going to show to you, because, you know, our cultures, our family, again, they did so much to come to this country, to come to other countries, to do so much that I think a lot of them instill in us that whole element of, you don't give up. You just keep going. Things are going to be in your way, but you just keep going. And with the next generation, we want to show them things are going to not necessarily be easy for you, if I'm perfectly frank with you, but you keep going if you really believe in something. And I believed in this. I know there's a demand for it. And now, you know, with the book, for example, it did hit number one on like two Amazon bestseller lists, not even just one, two.
No, I saw the social media post. That's amazing.
You know, in business, as I said, this is from someone
and so important a subject as well. And like you said, people are afraid to ask when it comes to finance and business. You know, I remember for years, you know, they'd say in the news, yeah, XYZ's a hawk on interest rates. And I'd be sitting there thinking, oh God, I really should know which way round is hawk. Does that mean they want them to go up or down? And you're thinking, oh God, listen, trust me, even the experts haven't got a clue half the time. So a book like this, which makes it accessible. Now you must tell me, which was your favorite animal in there?
Well, see, I have a bias. I'm obsessed with wolves.
Don't tell me the Wolf of Wall Street is your favorite.
No, but the Wolf of Wall Street was a really good one to research because of the fact you think, oh, you know, there's only one Wolf of Wall Street, and you look back and you're like, oh, no. Actually, this is a moniker that was given to somebody a long, long time ago. This isn't just, you know, Jordan Belfort. Right. This is something from ages ago. There was a con man who was pretending to be a US senator, and he was the original Wolf of Wall Street. Right. And I didn't know that. And then you've also got Mongolia and the fact that, you know, they're embracing the fact that they're the wolf economies. They are the wolf economy even. I think that's amazing, because I didn't know there was a relationship between Mongolia and a wolf. So I have that bias, if I'm perfectly frank with you, just because I love wolves. But in terms of the illustrations that Dominic has done, you know, I love his skunk works. His skunk works, he's got a steampunk skunk. And I thought that was really amazing. And at that point, I'd said to him, I found this term, you know, I think it's going to become a bit of a thing again, even for people who don't know. And I've been proved right, because, you know, you do things with the government. It is a term that has come up in government, skunk works, and having sort of an experimental group. So it's emerged again this year. And we know that all the big companies have these small little experimental groups. It emerged with Lockheed Martin back in, I think, World War II. And I said to Dominic, I really like this. Yes. You know, it's got a long history. I said, I really like this. And then he went away. And the beauty of the fact that we have this trusting relationship, and sometimes I'll be like, I've got an idea for an illustration. Other times he'll be like, let me do my thing, and we'll come back and forth. And he, you know, a steampunk skunk, that's brilliant, because steampunk is so original and it's so inventive, and it completely ties in. It's very, very clever. And that's the point of the book. It's not meant to be so clever that you get put off. It's meant to be that, you know, a 4-year-old will pick it up, and that has happened because people have sent me pictures of their kids picking it up, look at the pictures and be like, cool picture, and not be scared of ever being exposed to business. And then someone much like yourself, who is a complete and utter expert, can be like, oh, this is cool. This is quite cool. You know, that reminds me, of course, of
I've learned so much from your book. I've got to tell you, you might say I'm an expert. I've learned so much, and it's been so fun learning as well. But I think it goes back to the city, that in the city, very often, it's assumed we know everything, or that, oh yeah, we must know this. But also the people joining new professions, and the people that we'll have within City Hindus and watching on YouTube and so on, they might want to enter, but they lack the confidence because they're not sure about the language and the terminology. And what books like yours do, and especially because you're a BBC broadcast journalist as well, so you've got that credibility that goes with it, is it'll help build people's confidence up. Because once you know the language, you know, you naturally feel more confident. You think, oh yeah, I know what they're talking about. Oh, I get this. And you're absolutely right. There is a lack of books at that level. You know, you've got everything with a million equations in it, but the stuff which is what the language people need to understand when they're listening to somebody on the beat. Now, tell me, in terms of career, how did you get into broadcast journalism?
So I always wanted to be a newspaper journalist. So when I was 8 years old, I didn't know anybody or anything, but I'd read the local paper quite voraciously. And my family would bring a paper in. In fact, we'd have a couple of papers in the house, and that was really good to have that sort of exposure. And I just like playing with words. I've been very good at English since I was very, very young. And for me, it was, I want to tell stories. I like reporting. I like telling people about what's going on in the world. And now it's not just a job, it's like a vocation. I think it'd be
Yeah.
very difficult to ever not have journalism in me, whatever I end up doing, wherever I end up, like, plodding along, as it were. And so since the age of 8, and being very geeky, I was such a nerd. I would be doing school newspapers. I'd be doing, like, I was the school newspaper editor. I was I went to Oxford, and I specifically went to Mansfield College because I saw that they had a reputation for churning out journalists.
Right.
But while I was there, I was doing a column for the local paper because I come from a state school background. I'm ethnic minority. That's It was a lot of sort of targets that I was hitting in terms of, like, it wasn't unusual for someone to be at Oxford with that background. So
Right.
I was doing this column for the local paper. I was writing bits for the Telegraph, and I loved it. And all it is because you have a privilege to find out about other people's worlds without necessarily having to do that world, as it were, and then telling other people, other people saying, did you know that there's an actual job like this? Or did you know that this actually happens? And for me, that's literally what's been driving me. And I started working in local newspapers when I finished university. And that was the best training I could have, because it meant that I had to be accountable to the community in which I worked. So I worked for the Harrow Observer. I'm sure lots of you know that. And I was there for a good few years, and I started as a cub reporter and then ended up being acting news editor by the time I left. And I was in charge of Pinner. That was my patch. And, I'd wander around knocking on doors saying, hello, I'm your local paper reporter, and have you got any stories? And it was one of the best times of my life, to be honest. And then I ended up working for a independent production company where I met some of the best journalists in the world.
Right.
There's a guy called Sori Samora who worked in Sierra Leone and showed all the horrors that are happening in Sierra Leone when they had the war there. So I learned about sort of justice, and I learned about human rights journalism. There's a guy called Danny Bagado, who's one of my best friends, and he now works for Netflix, and Simon Ostrowski, who works for Vice, doing things about Russia. So I was learning a lot about international current affairs. And then I thought, you know what? Actually, maybe I should apply for the BBC. I'd never considered the BBC at that point. I didn't think it was for somebody like me.
And again, I'm just pause you there for a second, because I want to draw out this point to the audience. And, like I said, on the career path, people often don't realize that there's so many companies that, we think, oh, I'm an accountant, I must do accountancy, or I'm a lawyer, I must do this. But there are so many organizations out there which, could be their dream organization. I mean, it's such a privilege to be working at the BBC. And I guess for you, I mean, what comes across in everything you said is just that confidence. You don't think twice. Well, I'm sure you do, but it doesn't come across. You have that confidence. Right, I'm going to do this. Why not? Why can't I do it? And I think very often we're too, like you said, we're our own worst critics, and we hold ourselves back when nobody else is doing it very often.
Yeah, it's not something. It's not like I don't do that. I often take calculated risks, and I think I do have a lot of naivety in that. Why can't I do this? There might be infrastructures in play. There might be issues, but if I've been teaching this to my niece and nephew. If I don't try, I can't cry about it, because I have to at least try. And if it didn't work out, well, then I'll have learned something. I'll have picked up a lesson somehow. And in a way, that's been really good, because I think while I've been at the BBC, I've done like so many jobs. I've had 25 roles, as it were. Worked in investigations, worked on the website, worked in the natural history unit. If I hadn't worked in the natural history unit, would I have had the belief that I could do a bestiary, an animal guide? Probably not. But it gave me exposure to the fact that I can do environment related storytelling. I've had 2 fellowships. I have a trauma fellowship, a trauma journalism fellowship. Saying a trauma fellowship sounds a little bit dodgy. And I have a peace fellowship, and again, you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, but she's just a journalist, that's all she does. It's like, well, no, I've taken things that I've learned. So I have a trauma journalism fellowship because I have to work with incredibly sensitive stories. I have to work with people who've been in horrific situations.
Of course,
we work in the social sphere, and unfortunately the social sphere, while this is lovely and it's really engaged, there are people who use the social sphere in a completely different manner. And if you're reporting on it, you have to be aware of the fact that you will be exposed to horrific things or nasty things. And so I took that and went to go and learn about neuroscience, and went to go and learn about best practice in order to help myself and other people and our contributors. And it means that my journalism stands out because I have that special skill set, because I was like, I'm going to go and do something further. Same with the peace fellowship.
I think from what you're saying, which comes across, is that you don't stop yourself. What you do, you say, well, why can't I do it? And I think especially at this time, we'll have, like I said before, a lot of people who are looking at career changes. What you've also done is you've looked to find a career which is fulfilling, which is important in the bigger sphere of things. So like you said, beyond business, you're dealing with these big global issues, and obviously journalism, something which allows you to do that. What are the plan? What's the next, what's the next step? What's going to happen next?
I honestly don't know, because the pandemic's been really interesting, if I'm perfectly frank with you, because it shook a lot of things up. So I'm working at home, I'm working in my little bedroom. When people say to me, what are you doing now? I'm like, I'm working on coronavirus pandemic storytelling, which is rather vague, but also very detailed at the same time, because that's all the stories that I'm doing. And clearly coronavirus storytelling is never going to go away, because 5 years time, 6 years time, there will be huge ripple effects from what's going on right now, which in a way, in terms of, because we're talking about, how do you tell your story? That's really useful for me, because I can say, well, look, I've been working in this pandemic, which has affected everything, be it health, be it business, be it, economies, be it anything. And therefore I'm capable of being, like a chameleon, because all I do is talk in animals now, but I'm adaptable. I can change colors. I can do what you need in that respect. So what's the next project at the moment? I'm learning about marketing. I'm learning about pushing the book here, there, and everywhere, and work catering to different audiences. And that's a really useful skill set, because you also have to be able to market yourself. In terms of the next actual project, I don't know at the moment. If I'm honest with you, I'll probably have to take a little bit of a breather. I think it's really important that when you've done something so big and so intensive, that you give yourself time to take a step back and figure out what's been mulling in your brain, because the brain doesn't stop. While I've been doing all this, while the pandemic's been happening, the brain doesn't stop at all. What I have found in my career so far, though, is when you look back retrospectively, that there's a lot of overlap. Again, just going back to the book, that there's something in there called yak shavings, which is one of my favorite bits that came out when we were doing the research. And it's about like this little thing that happens that you don't quite realize is actually quite integral to the bigger picture, as it were. And I love the fact that we discovered yak shavings, and also we found out that yaks can also get shaved, but there you go. And in, like I said, I have this peace fellowship now. So I went to Thailand, and it was funded by Rotary International. So I'm a Rotary Peace Scholar. And after I came back, because I wanted to learn about peace and conflict resolution, because every story has some sort of drama. After I came back, it was amazing, because a story that I'd written in 2011 when the Arab Spring was happening, where I was talking to people from around the world about their lives and what had happened to disrupt their lives, it ended up being in this huge peace book, like this, massive reference book. And I clearly in 2011, 2012, I never would have realized that my article would have ended up in 2017, it would have been, used in a 2017 peace book. But at that point, I'm now learning about peace. So clearly you fight, when you look back at your career, you realize that there are moments that are important and that show what your interests are.
And I think an important message again for the audience there is you spoke in terms of skills. And that's becoming increasingly important in sort of the modern workplace. You're developing your different skill sets, which are transferable right across. I mean, the marketing part, the social marketing. And to be honest, Dhruti, every time I open up social media, you pop up more than Donald Trump does right now. I open up my Twitter, I open up my LinkedIn, I open up my Facebook, and you're obviously doing it right. But that's something which people need to know, whichever careers they're going to be in, and get those niche specialities. And that's also then opened up doors to other things. You've put yourself in a position where people are calling on you to do different things. I think that's an important career lesson as well to people. You become knowledgeable, you've got a niche, you become indispensable for those different areas, because, she's done that. And I think that's something which people would find very useful as well. If you were to narrow down the most sort of important lessons you'd give to people at the moment who are looking at, right, what do I do next with my career? Do I switch career? Given the diversity of experience you've had, given, BBC, right up there, but I know you've worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, you've worked with, you've done Nobel Dialogues, you've done Skoll Foundation as well. So there's some huge names out there. What would be your sort of best tips to people who are thinking about, do I stay with my job, do I move, or I'm looking for a new job? What are your top tips?
So I constantly am thinking about this. So don't think that you're alone in that respect. Like I'm constantly thinking, what's the next step? But I do think, especially with this pandemic happening right now, it is about calculated risks. You know, because we are in a very unusual time right now. So, you know, if you'd asked me this last year, it would have been like, well, actually do this, but this is a different context. So what I would suggest doing is what I do is, where am I at now?
Yeah.
What is my passion? Because Alpesh, you picked up on that. It is that question of what drives me. There's no point moving if you're going to be unhappy. There are a lot of things happening at the moment that can make people unhappy, that can make people afraid. You don't need that extra stuff in your life. You know, if I'm going to move, is it going to be in a direction that I want to head towards? Will I have to make some sacrifices? And you might have to, but it will lead me to being in a direction where, you know, I want to work in supply chains, or I want to work in food, or I want to work in whatever, you know, whatever. Do I need to go and do extra courses? Do I have to take time out to that course? Have I got enough money in order to help me survive in that respect? So I always sit down. It's about calculated risks in terms of, what do I have at the present? What am I not happy with right now?
Yeah.
Can I change that within the circumstances that I'm in right now? If not, then yes, maybe I do need to move to a different circumstance. But if I move to that different circumstance, what are the potential pitfalls? If you can absorb those potential pitfalls, then really what's holding you back? I think that's really key. My thing is always like, what's the worst that's going to happen, and can I absorb that? Do I, again, going back to the family, and you know, it's comedy that my mum came in, but I know I have support, and that's really, really important. What support do you have around you if things don't necessarily work out at that first moment in the way that you very much would like? Because sometimes things don't work out the way that you would like, but that's not to say it's not going to be a learning curve. I do think the art of reframing is really, really important, because it helps you build resilience. So when I talked about having that fellowship that I did in New York, the Dark Fellowship, that really brought home to me the importance of resilience and support networks. So, you know, I'll sit there and I will read books about resilience. You know, I will sit there and try and learn from other people about how they just managed to keep going even when things were tough. I will go and talk to people from the Dark Network, or from like Women of the Future, or all these other networks that I've, you know, managed to get myself involved in, because it's really important to see what else is out there. And again, Alpesh, you've already mentioned it, connections. When you sit down, what connections do you have? I think it's really important that you don't use people. You think that's awful. That's not what networking is about. But you think to yourself, is now a time where I can just have a conversation with somebody to say, what are you up to? What do you actually do? Is that something that I could potentially have some interest in? You know, and that could just, you know, one, put you on radar, but also get your new, you know, get sparks going in your brain as well about, actually, do you know what? I have no plans to do that whatsoever. But actually, that seems interesting. You talked about language and not knowing language. I didn't know what a consultant was for years, and I got sponsored by Accenture at university. Do you know what I mean? I still didn't know what a consultant was, and I was a little bit scared about consultancy. And
There's a lot of consultants who don't know what consultants are.
Oh, that's the thing. But I'm just like, well, actually, consultancy isn't this weird, like, oh, it's only for these people. It's actually something, you know, in a way, you know, we're all doing this now. We're consulting to a degree, and it's like, well, what does that actually mean? Don't be scared by the language. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's not for me because I don't understand it. It's not for you right now, but just go and decode it, and then figure out, should I move, should I not move, etc. It's about being able to engage in dialogue, whatever you decide to do, I think.
Yeah. Now, before you share your screen, I just want to make sure everybody's got this screen and that they can see it.
Brilliant.
There it is.
Or go to hive.co.uk, which is independent booksellers. I'm like, not just Amazon. There's Hive, there's Waterstones. It's available globally.
What's Hive? How do you spell it?
Hive, it's Hive.
Oh, Hive. Okay, as in beehive.
Yes, yeah. See, all we do is talking animals. See? It's a really simple metaphor.
We don't even realize we're doing, because when you mentioned chameleon earlier on, I didn't even think, of course, chameleon is, it's an animal. So now you are more than welcome. I'm going to unshare that then, and you're more than welcome to share. I think you're going to share a slide, weren't you? You're going to share a screen.
I'm just going to, it'll be quite quick, but just, I thought I might as well use
the
beasts that I have to just sort of, one, showcase the animals, and you can see what the book's actually about, because a lot of people didn't understand the concept when I first came up with it.
Of course.
And two, also just show them, like, bearing in mind that I worked on this for 4 years with Dominic, so that's a long time that we were doing this in our, you know, in our spare time. But I learned a lot of I learned a lot of valuable lessons from the creatures that I was coming across. So since we're doing a career clinic, I thought I might as well share this.
Yes, no, please.
So I'll just keep it in this mode actually. So yeah, so the ones I'm going to two things. I said, oh, she says.
And by the way, it's amazingly well illustrated.
Yeah, Dominic's amazing. Like I said,
it's just extraordinary how good it is.
I found him on Instagram.
Oh wow.
I was like, hi Dominic, we don't really know each other that well, but I've got this idea and I like your animals. So clearly flattery will get you everywhere.
But I love the attitude, but that's the attitude. You basically, one thing that's come across from this is not just the passion, the energy, the likability, which is incredibly important when you want to get things done, but you just make it happen.
Yeah.
and that's really important. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. So these are the ones I'm going to sort of go through. By the way, I have to apologize because if I'd known Alpesh had an OBE when I create this slide, I would have stuck that on there. So no disrespect intended. But Landon got, you've done really well. So well done.
I'm still in shock. So I've not even been using it.
It's amazing. But the reason why I've put this up is I have a portfolio website. And if you're involved in storytelling, I think it's really important because one, people Google you. If I'm doing interviews and I'm actually interviewing people saying, oh, will you give me the privilege to tell your story? I can tell you now that they will have Googled me before they trust me. If we're working in these Zoom times now, even if you're not in journalism, I think it's important to know what is being said about you and where, and if you're able to take control of it. So in terms of your career, make sure you know what's on your LinkedIn, your socials. So Alpesh is right in that I'm all over the shop because I'm marketing the book like crazy. But it's also to sort of take control of the narrative so that if people aren't on Facebook, because some people don't want to be on Facebook, that's fine.
Of course.
Then they're on LinkedIn, but there is a conversation that's more bespoke to each platform that I'm involved in. So this is my website and it's streetshah.com. And again here, because I know that there's no place anywhere on the internet which has where you can buy my book in one central hit, here's where you can buy it in South Africa, here's where you can buy it in India, etc. I created a page on my website. So it's about taking control, have a website.
And that, by the way, just on that point, in terms of careers, that's becoming increasingly important. That, not only do you have LinkedIn, you have your own site, you have a blog, because when future employers, when employers or whoever, business partners, whatever, are looking you up, it's good that, like you said, you can put across what your views are already, your thoughts that you're a leader in that space or whatever else. So I think that's something which I really want to underline to people who are looking at careers. There's always something you can be doing even before you send off your CV and all the rest of it.
But even me as a journalist, if I'm looking for experts and you have that expertise, I'm going to be Googling you. So what is it I'm going to find about you? If you're somebody that I need to know about because, you spent however many years studying XYZ and I'm like, shoot, I'm doing a story about XYZ. I need you. But if I can't find you, that's a detriment to my storytelling. But here, again, it's about being aware of what people think about you and who you are. So here it's, just a myriad of the roles that I have. And it's about sort of not thinking of yourself in one particular position or being, I work for a huge institution. It could be very easy to become institutionalized. I'm not going to sort of say that I'm not necessarily institutionalized, but I think it's very important to have something beyond that because the institution isn't necessarily stuck to you, as it were.
No, absolutely.
So it's about sort of moving on. Again, it's about defying. So this book, for me, is always going to be about defying stereotypes. And I think it's really important that you remember yourself as an individual and you don't, you try and defy stereotypes where you can, because you don't want to be sort of classed as, that's all they are. They are a woman. They are this. And it's like, no, I'm not. I'm more than that. And, and I can provide you with X, Y, Z. So here, bear markets, again, I'll be very quick, but as you see, this is sort of one of the key illustrations. So we've got a bear at the market and we'd sort of explain, this is what a bear is. This is the etymology of it. This is a bear investor. But for me, again, it's about breaking stereotypes. Every time I think of a bear, for me, I'm like a bear man. I'm going to the market. I'm doing something a bit different. Here, bear markets aren't necessarily great because, I don't know. I'm not the expert here. Like Alpesh, you'll have to step in. But here, bear markets.
I was just about to ask you, are we going to see the markets go up or down in the next 12 months? I'm putting you on the spot.
Idea, and I cannot say that because I'm a BBC journalist. I have no idea.
You know what? You're an expert now because the true experts would tell you, I have no idea.
I don't know, and I'm never going to. But that's the thing. Bear markets right now, if you Google, they are actually constantly, bear and bull markets are constantly being used in general newspapers, general parlance, as it were. So it's important that people, whether you're a 10-year-old or whether you're a 90-year-old or whatever, you can understand what a bear market is. because I would have heard bear markets loads of times and not known what it was at all.
Of course,
you know?
yeah.
So that's what it's about, defying stereotypes, and that's what you all should do in your own careers. Dog eat dog, right? I bring this one because I like Dominic's illustration. It's quite rough, but also I think it's really important to steer clear of dog eat dog behavior. Personally, that's my own ethos, because it's a matter of survival of the fittest, and I think it's important to have ambition, but I don't think you should ever harm somebody in order to succeed. I think that's really, there are people I feel who do that, and for me, I try not to do that because there's no need to do it. And also, people remember. I think Maya Angelou, who said, I mean, I'd have to triple check, it's not what you say, it's how you make people feel. And even 10 years later, if in your career, if you made somebody feel bad, it's not going to be great for you at that point. So, and I think, I mean, this is City Hindus. I was brought up in a Jain faith. I think that's really important, that you acknowledge what culture, what your culture, what role it plays in how you operate, even in the professional world. So dog eat dog. So chickens and lions. Dominic has chickens, so I think he based this chicken image on one of his own chickens.
Right.
But and I mean, I put lions because, again, my parents were born in Africa. They were born in Kenya. Right. And I think that's, again, been really important. When people say to me, you can't call yourself African, I'm like, I can do what I want. My family's got, if they're Kenyan, British, Indian, so am I. I can do what I want. Don't you define who I am. And I'm really proud of Africa, if I'm honest with you. I'm really proud of Kenya. I'm really proud of the continent.
I suspect your Gujarati, like mine, is half Swahili.
Yeah, well, we're never quite sure, are we? Because we're never sure what words are Swahili and what words are Gujarati.
Absolutely
mixed up. And then you get schooled by a child saying that's not Gujarati, that's Swahili. But the reason why I put this in is, one, because I wasn't ever expecting chickens and lions actually to appear in the business world when we first embarked on this. Right. So again, it's about defying stereotypes. And here you learn that chicken investors are afraid. They approach the markets with trepidation, so they cluck around. There's no particular plan. They're really spooked. So if you're involved in money and you're involved in markets, is that the sort of investor that you want to be, or the sort of person who is investing on your behalf? Be aware of that. And the lion economies, it was first used by Boston Consulting Group to describe the 8 major countries that were driving growth in on the African continent, so South Africa, Algeria, Botswana, Egypt, Mauritius, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. But now it's a metonym for pretty much any African economy. Right. And so it's really important that if you hear, lion economies, you've got to just also take a step forward to check which economy we're actually discussing, because Africa is a big place and full of very different sort of individual economies, as it were. And we've also got ASOP in there, because you should have ASOP everywhere, really, in terms of, you hear the concept of the lion's share.
Yes, of course.
So there's a lot of there's a lot we had to leave out. But the other reason I think it's important for career clinic time, which is what we're at, it's okay to be afraid. I think that's really important. I'm afraid of a lot of things, but what I try and do is I accept my fear. I mean, I was probably afraid of doing this, to be perfectly frank with you, because it's out of my comfort zone. But it's like, you go on, you got to prep, you just continue. Yeah. And so for me, I'm always a little bit chicken, and then I have to go, nope, I'm going to actually come up with a plan and become more lion, become more brave, become more like, I'm going to go forth. What's the worst that's going to happen? Yeah. So that's why I think chickens and lions are really, really good to think about in your own career path. Like, do you want to be a chicken? Yeah. It's okay to be a chicken. Chickens exist for a reason, but you can transform. It's okay. You can turn the page, to use the pun. I like
No, no, I love it. And I love the way you're sort of the attitude. And it is about, in terms of careers, it is about having that attitude that, no, I can do it. Like you said, how often do we use animal metaphors to say, I'm going to be like that?
Yeah, it's, and it makes it less scary. Again, if you've got a family, for example, it's really important. I love horses. But if you've got a family, you don't, like, I was a kid, I was like, I'm not going to do business studies. What's that? That's for people who like business. I don't know what business is. I work in journalism. That's still a business. It took me a good few years to figure that out, but it's still a business. Yeah. But if I had had a book like this, or been exposed to maybe terms like this as a kid, I think it would have been a different thing. I wouldn't have been scared of business.
No, exactly.
So the reason why we've included the purple squirrel, we only found out about this one this year, actually, but apparently it's used in recruitment circles. and it stands for the perfect candidate. So the one that will
right.
Yeah, I didn't know this, but the one that will fit every single criteria that is used in the recruitment advert.
Right.
So, they've got the right education, the right experience, the best attitude, the perfect qualifications. They're like, that's the purple squirrel. I don't think purple squirrels exist. I can't think that you will have anyone who will meet that dream role.
No, absolutely.
And so that's the reason why I thought it was really important for us to put it in here. And I love that Dominic's done it as a superhero, a superhero purple squirrel, because it is mythical at the end of the day. And you hear a lot about, just because, and I think it's maybe, the figure's always about men rather than women. In the research that I read, it's like, just because you think you can only fit, 80% of the criteria, doesn't mean that you should say, well, that's not for me at all. Ask about it. Ask about the role. Sometimes the criteria really is off-putting because you'll never be able to meet every single thing.
Well, it's often said, I think there's research to back it up. If a man meets 20% of the criteria, he'll apply for the job. If a woman meets 80%, she might still not apply for the job. And I know there's academic research which shows when they looked at job applicants, there's that overconfidence that comes through and is a gender bias amongst men that academic researchers have found doesn't, on the whole, happen in women. And so very often they self-select themselves out of roles they could otherwise have more than competently done.
Exactly. So it's about, so for me, the reason why I've included this one out of the book, we're in a strange time. People will be looking for jobs, and you will be looking at recruitment adverts, but don't rule yourself out if it's something that you really have a passion for. I think that's really important. And then yak shaving. I mean, I've already actually discussed yak shaving, so I won't say it too much, but I just love it. I think, it's, you've got to have a little bit of fun. And, again, this came from a very sort of I think it was a very computer orientated term. It's from the MIT lab, a programming term, but it's now moved beyond it. And I think for me, that's the lesson, is that it's again about being adaptable and thinking, okay, just because I've worked in programming all my life doesn't mean that you're going to be doesn't mean you have to be a programmer for your entire, rest of career. Don't mean that, you should rule yourself out from doing X, Y, and Z. If you really want to go for something, I think you just have to think, what's the worst that's going to happen? This yak gets shaved, but it's okay. It'll grow again. That's why we wanted to check that yak shaving was a real thing, because we're like, how mythical is this? But yeah, I just like it. It's weird.
I love it. I think, Dhruti, sadly, we've run out of time. But what I wanted to say is, I think both in terms of the book and how you've interpreted it, also the usefulness for careers and your own attitude, which has come across, that passion, that energy, that putting yourself in a position to be lucky as well. I hope people get the book, but also use it as a basis for moving forward in their careers or in their lives. Because I think that's come across from what you said, and that excitement that you have for don't know what's going to happen next, but whatever it is, it's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. And I think that really comes across well. I'm sorry we have to cut it short. We're going to make sure this is replayed. We're going to put it in the City Hindus newsletter. We're going to make sure that it's out there on our social media as well. And then as soon as you re-social media it, it'll go really viral. So thank you very much for taking the time out for doing this. And I have to say, you mentioned you're from the Jain community. I have to say, we should probably change the name from City Hindus to City Hindus and Jain network, because we've got so many members who are from the Jain community as well, and it's fantastic that we're able to reach across both as well. It was lovely seeing your mum. Please give her my regards again. I love it. That was fantastic, and we'll make sure we get the book mentioned everywhere. So Dhruti, thank you so much.
And can I again say congratulations on the OB and everything that you've been doing, because you also have a portfolio career, and I think that's really important. That you're looking at me and we're having this conversation now, but if you look at Alpash's CV, I was like, man, I've got to learn some lessons from this guy. I thought I was doing all right with hands in lots of pies.
You're doing incredibly well. You're doing incredibly well, and I'll be learning from you. Certainly that energy. I love the energy, and I think if anything, from a careers perspective, it's that passion and energy which is probably the secret sauce beyond the qualifications or anything else. And I think you've exhibited that. And I suspect that's what's led to the successes as much as any of the qualifications. It's that energy you bring. And people want to be surrounded by people who've got energy, you know, and so I love that. Thank you very much for your kind words about me, but it is about how fantastic both your career and what role model you've been, and the book as well. But thanks for all the work at the BBC as well on my favorite subject of business and finance. So thank you very much indeed, Dhruti. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dhruti, we're gonna so I've stopped on YouTube, and I'm going to sadly have to stop on Zoom and the City Hindus Network one as well. But I just wanted to say thank you very much personally as well on this. So I know we'll stay in touch, and we'll I'm sure do many other things.
Thank you so much
as well. So thank you so much for this, and congratulations on the book. Really pleased.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.